Now we want to build a component for selecting multiple images. So let's add a new file. We're going to call this ImageInputList.js. Here's our component. In this container, we want to lay out our image inputs horizontally. So for this container, we should set flex direction. Now what props do we need here? Well, this interface is a collection of image inputs. So here we should have image URIs, which we can set to an empty array by default. Now we want to map these to a bunch of image input components. So basic React. We type image URIs.map. We get this URI and map it to an image input component. Now here we should set image URI to this URI and onChange image to. Now what should we do when this image is changed? Well, currently we don't have the functionality to replace an image. So if you have an image inside an image input and the change event is raised, that means the user has deleted that image. So here we should handle deletion. But just like the image input component, we don't want to maintain local state here. We want to have the state somewhere else inside our form. So here we need to add two more props on remove image and on add image. So if you add or remove an image from this list, we're going to raise these two events, okay? So here we pass a function and call on remove image with this URI, okay? Now, because we're using the map method, here we should also set the key prop that is just basic React. So we're going to set it to the URI of this image. So we're done with this part. Now, after these images, we always want to have an image input for adding a new image. So over here, one more time, we're going to use our image input component. Here we're going to handle the onChange event. So if this event is raised, that means the user has added a new image. So we get the URI of that image, and here we call onAddImage with that URI. So once again, we're not maintaining local state here. We're just raising events. Now let's test our app. So save the changes. We go to app.js. I'm going to delete all the code that we have written except this state variable. So we don't need any of these functions. Now we should rename this variable to image URIs because we're dealing with a list of URIs. And let's initialize this to an empty array. Now instead of image input, we're going to use ImageInputList. Let's rename this prop to image URIs. And instead of onChange image, we're going to handle onAddImage and onRemove image. So onAddImage, what should we do here? We get the URI of the new image. Now we should add that to our state variable. But we're not going to write that code here inline. We're going to write it inside a separate function called handleAdd that takes the URI. Now, whenever you see this pattern in your code, like you have a parameter, then you call a function and pass that parameter, you can simplify your code by simply using the name of the function. So here we can just type handleAdd. Because handleAdd is going to be a function that takes the URI and does something with it. So there is no need to define a separate inline function here, okay? So here's handleAdd. Now let's implement it. So handleAdd takes the URI. Now we should add this to our array of URIs. Again, this is basic React. So I'm going to call setImageURIs. Using the spread operator, I'm going to take a copy of our original array and then add the URI at the end. Pretty basic. Now, what about deletion? Very similar. So here we handle onRemoveImage. Here we take a URI, and then we should pass it to a function like handleRemove, like this. Again, we have this repetitive pattern in our code, so we can simplify it by simply typing the name of the function. Now, let's implement this function. So how are we going to remove this from our array? There are a few different ways to do this. I'm going to use the filter method. So first we call setImageURIs. Now we go to our original array. We want to get all URIs except the one that we get here. So we use the filter method, give it a function. This function takes image URI. Now here we type a Boolean expression. Image URI does not equal to URI. Again, basic React. Now let's test our implementation. So let's add an image. Good. Now we can add another image to this list, but we need some margin here. So back to our component. Now this image input currently doesn't support a style property. We can extend it and give it this feature, but I think this is unnecessary. There is a simpler solution. We can wrap this inside a view and apply the styles to that view. So let's add a view here. Now we should set the key prop on this view because that is the container. Now we set the style to styles.image. And this part is super easy. For this image, we set margin right to, let's say, 10 pixels. So now we have a bit of margin here. Let's add a second image. Okay, good. What about another image? Perfect. Now I'm going to delete the first image. Perfect. One more. Okay. Our component is ready. So now let's move on to the next step.